What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here, and bringing another little nugget to add to the Soul Tribe archive. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the moon in Leo in the ninth house, and I kind of like this placement for the moon. I think that this is really nice. Now, when you talk about that good old moon, the moon really is closely kind of related to the body, and thinking about, like, I think about the things that we feel with the body whether it comes to the emotions. That's one thing with the moon, or just really to the just when just sensing the movement and things when it feels like the body's getting sick or something like that, or when the body feels good. Like it's noticing those fluctuations and things. That's going to be something that's really tied in with the moon, how we understand how to be nurtured. The moon is very closely tied into like the mother figure. That's another thing with the moon. Can be related to like the home or the dwelling space. The moon is really kind of even closely kind of tied into not just the idea of growth, but there's this idea to understand like mental concepts and abstractions. It's a very intuitive energy when you're working with the moon. And this is something too, especially if you have a night chart. You want to be really in touch with that moon placement, and understand where that, what house that moon falls in, and really get a feel for that. It's going to be you may find, that you relate to that moon placement a little bit stronger than maybe even your sun placement, which is something to think about. Then when you talk about Leo, Leo is the fixed fire sign, and they are active or yang in nature, and they're ruled by the sun. And when you think about Leo, I think about that energy. That fire energy is life-giving. It's passionate. It's that the will. And I think of them with Leo when they find that calling, that energy that fuels it. And then I'm talking about Leo in general. That's when Leo shines brightest. It's warm. It's generous. It's there's an infectious, uplifting energy, again, life-giving energy. And it's really incredible. I think when it finds that craft, to find its soul calling in a sense. And I think with that fixed energy, Leo has that capacity to sustain. I think consistency is a very good word for Leo, where you think about that, when you think about that just that staying power that the fixed energy brings. So, and then when you talk about the ninth house, this was known as the house of God. And some of the things, this is going to be one of the Caden houses. And some of the themes that this house covers are going to deal with like travel, especially long distance travel, such as like foreign places, foreign people. This can be education, especially like higher education and things like that. But just education and learning in general, spirituality, your religion, your beliefs. This can deal with even the kind of like getting into kind of like augury, divination, things about that law, is another thing that kind of gets into that ninth house there. So when you're working with this placement, a few things to consider. One, you would have a Sagittarius rising by whole sign, and you are going to want to look to the sun, because the sun is going to import the themes of this house to wherever it is. And then the moon is going to import the themes of the eighth house to this house, because that's where the moon in the eighth house deals with the themes of like death, inheritances, the money and possessions of others. You can deal with like taxes, debts, loans, cult studies. So a couple of things that I would talk with this. One thing that really kind of popped into mind is wondering how that is when it comes to like education. Was that something that was fostered early on? That curiosity to learn and to grow, to be exposed to maybe different cultures. Maybe you happen to have a parent, maybe a mother possibly, who happened to travel a lot, so maybe that was something that was in the mix. Maybe they were like a flight attendant, or maybe did something with like the military or something along those lines, but it just happened to be just one that just happened to travel quite a bit. But that, just wondering what that would look like. Was that something that was invested in? Was that something that, in thinking about like how, was that something that even like now, how is that something that what's your relationship with that sense of education, that sense of higher learning? Not that necessarily you have to go to college, but I think having that something where you're fueling the mind, like expanding oneself. I think that could be a really great way of really kind of nurturing that moon placement, and it could be, just traveling abroad. Maybe you happen to do something for school, maybe there's a program that you can invest in, that allows you to go to different countries and things, trying to travel, study there. So that might be something to look into, different loans and grants and things, depending on how the moon is aspected, of course, and, the condition of the sun. I would be mindful maybe as far as like debts and loans and things like that when it comes to education that could, present like maybe a little bit of trickiness. But that's something that I would think, just like expanding one's world, doing something where, schedule yourself a vacation every now and again, go to somewhere that you've never been, go to experience different culture, learn a different language, maybe plan something for next year. And in that year, learn as much as of the language and of the culture that you can. So when you jump in there, it's just like a whole experience. Cause the moon can be really closely associated with the gathering of people. And so that would what a better way to get along with the community than to just be able to just kind of go in well equipped, like that. So that might be something to consider. And then, you're learning a new skill on top of that. Again, kind of expanding the mind there. But I would also pay attention to, when you think about that inheritance aspect of the eighth house, that thinking about the sort of beliefs in things that you've inherited, whether it be political or spiritual, religious, and things, and how that has fostered you, like how that has shaped who you are now, and how those beliefs do they still nurture who you're wanting to become. I think that having that healthy relationship with your, not necessarily, challenging your beliefs, but like in a way of just like making sure that like you're still like they're getting you to where you need to be, or is there something more that you're looking for? And then that could be where if there's something more, you can like kind of dabble in like, different cultures and things, and see if there's something about a certain religion, certain spirituality thing that happens to fascinate you. Astrology would be a really good thing for a moon and for this placement. So yeah, that may be another thing that I would think would come in with this. I think even too, like, as far as like, what to go to school, for, maybe if that's something you're thinking about. I think that I've noticed where with like eighth house themes, with those kind of death themes, it could be that trying to prevent that, so that could be doing something. The moon is a very nurturing, nursing energy. So that could be doing something in healthcare, maybe it's doing in whatever that is, working in the medical field, maybe it's doing again something abroad, something with like Doctors Without Borders or something like that. The moon is actually too, just a little sidebar, the moon is associated with kind of like wanderings and things. So again, there's a real strong travel aspect, I think, with this place, especially when the moon is in like the third or the ninth house. I think that there is a need to get out there, as often as possible, and just to kind of again expand one's world. But I could even see this as, maybe even doing something with like thinking about other people's resources. That could be working with like with learning about banking. This could be doing something like as far as accounting. Maybe this is working in some sort of like stocks. This whatever that's look like. Again, maybe taxes. If I didn't say taxes, but yeah, that's another sort of thing that I think could get a lot of leverage there. Maybe even doing something working in like history, thinking about like that, even that death aspect, working with, people in the past, thinking about whatever I like, maybe like archaeology or something like that. That could be really cool. Get to travel to different places, do like different excavations and things. That's exciting. So that could be something that could maybe show up in this with this placement there. But I would think too, even just like on a more kind of spiritual component. I think that is something, having a regular spiritual practice, whatever that looks like, having a daily meditation, something that keeps you consistently checked in with that sense of source, that energy, that higher force that's moving around us, that's just something I think to think about. And however that's looking like, having that healthy relationship with that, and exploring that relationship as that makes sense in your journey. I think that's would be a good, even to get either any kind of sort of like occult studies or things like that, mentioning bringing up that eighth house. That could be really great for that. Even like doing maybe work with like ancestors, who knows what that looks like. So that's definitely something I would think about with this placement there. and maybe even just like, meeting different people, just exposing yourself. And who knows, you might even find that you get a lot of support from people from other places. So that might even be another really cool thing that could maybe show up in this placement there. I can see this even too, like, if you're like writing a book or something like that, needing some sort of support for like a funding for like a study. Let's say if you're like in some sort of like college or things like that. The eighth house can be, again, that receiving resources from other people. So like sort of like crowdsourcing could be something that brings up. But again, especially from maybe places that are foreign to you, like something like that. Don't be afraid to expand your audience and see how that plays out there. You might be, say if you're in Africa, you might do very well in China or something like that. Just something to do. I'm just throwing out just an example, but yeah, that would be a I would even think too, just with the moon, just representing the home space as well. Again, maybe a possibility of potentially even living abroad. That might even be something where investing in some land like that. That could even be thinking about inheritances, not just like what you receive, but I also like to think with the eighth house, just like what you plan on leaving behind. That could be something where maybe invest in a home abroad or something like that. So that might be another thing that I could see maybe potentially kind of show up in with this chart. But you definitely need the whole aspect of the chart to get a better picture of this. But if you have this placement or know someone who's working with this placement, down in the comment section, let us know how this has showed up for you, because and it's always really cool to see how these placements come to life. It's really really fascinating and really really cool when you can see those stories come together. And if this is something where if you want to explore your natal placements more, or if you want to work with any sort of like any upcoming transits that are going to be working for you, that are going to be most prominent for you, or if you want to do any sort of like electional astrology, things like that, down in the description box there's a link to book a consultation with me. And if you have any questions as far as like the services that I provide, my email's down there, so definitely feel free to reach out to me. And if you want to support the work that I'm doing, I have a Patreon page. There will be a link down for that. I'm going to be slowly kind of updating all of the videos that I'm going to be doing. That's going to be a process. That's fine, but there's going to be a link for my Patreon page, so definitely go and check that out. I do a monthly podcast there, and I post the lunar shenanigans as well. So that's another place if that happens to be where you happen to. I'm working on maybe expanding outside of that. That's just a little side project there, but yeah, there's where I post if you subscribe to the subscriptions, then you get a monthly electional podcast with all the auspicious dates for that month. And the second tier gets a personalized monthly transit report from me. So that's a really exciting thing. So yeah, definitely go over there if that's something that you're interested in. But until next time, stay mindful out there. Keep raising the vibration through the roof. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.